everyone, and welcome to Indie Business Radio for Monday, May 19th, 2008. I'm your host, Donna Maria, and you have arrived at the one place where we empower you to enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way. Today's show is sponsored by the Indie Beauty Network, the leading provider of business services to small, independent cosmetics manufacturers for products liability insurance, business counseling, social media coaching, and more to help your business prosper. Visit indiebeauty.com today. Well, you know how I feel about promoting yourself on the Internet, and you also know how I feel about the power of the written word and the spoken word to help you do that. And I have got a woman on today's show who has just an absolute example of the path that we can all follow to put our words out there and turn them into not only ways for us to pursue our passions and do the things that we love, but also to support our families. Today's guest is Marcy Goldman. She is a professional pastry chef and master baker and a graduate of the Quebec Hotel School and the author of The Best of BetterBaking.com. And she's also the Julia Child Award-nominated author of A Treasury of Jewish Holiday Baking. Marcy is a food journalist and a writer. She is also the creator and host of the website BetterBaking.com. She lives in Montreal with her 3 sons, and she joins me from Montreal today for the show. Marcy, welcome to Indie Business Radio.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Donna Maria. It's a pleasure.
You know, when I met you, I want to share with my listeners how it is that I met you. We kind of met because of our mutual love for fragrances. And then one day, I opened up the Washington Post. And I read an article in the food section written by someone named Marcy Goldman, and I remember going, now, could that be the same Marcy Goldman that I met on the Internet? And sure enough, when I emailed you, I discovered that it was. So, you know, the power of the Internet cannot be understated here, but that's how I met you, and I think that's just a really cool story to share. Do you remember that?
Very much so, but it shows you if things are meant to be, they have a way of, like, matrixing them, their way about.
Yeah, I certainly think that's true. And then your most recent book, Marcy, is called A Passion for Baking. And this, by the way, everyone out there, if you go to indiebusinessradio.com, you'll see Marcy's photograph and a link to this book that you can purchase it as well. And this is like, how many cookbooks is this for you, Marcy?
This is my 3rd cookbook, and to me, I wouldn't say, it's about my best. It's just all my spirit and adoration of baking in the style that I want to do. It's with my wings not being clipped. I had a wonderful editorial team behind me. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty special, this book.
Well, let's take us back, Marcy, to your life before the books that you've authored and, before sort of striking it out on your own. Tell us a little bit about your background before Better Baking.
Actually, it's hard to remember the before BB period in my life, but I've always been publishing and always been baking. I had my own newspaper when I was about 12 called the Goldman Times, and I think publishing and writing was always in my bones. Always been baking since I was 8 or 9. I just thought baking was a little bit more mysterious than cooking. I think you get a lot more recognition when you make great bread or a special cookie versus your best salad dressing. So I think there's the alchemy of it, always attracted me. But when I got to my teens and mid-20s, as many people will find themselves, you're faced with what shall I do, what can I do, what am I good at? And there aren't a lot of signs saying, writer, apply here, or to become an author, or even bakers in training. I mean, these are professions that fall between the lines. The route to them is a little bit less direct than if you want to become an accountant or a dentist. And I started, writing, freelancing a little bit, but doing kind of clerical jobs at many places. Fortunately, I got fired. Everywhere I was, I got fired terribly. Wouldn't get the coffee, but would make the mocha coffee, would roast the coffee, but would not serve the coffee. I guess I had a little bit of an attitude going. This is in the late 70s or so. And one day, the last time I got fired, I thought, that is it. I am never going to get a 4% check again, which is what we get in Canada. Uh-huh. And I started baking. I didn't see writing jobs, still didn't really know what I want to write. Started baking, supplying little restaurants and cafes around my home in downtown.
Now, did you have children by this time?
No, this is like in my early 20s. I was just feverishly looking, as most people in their 20s, and sometimes for the rest of your life, will look, what is the thing that's going to earn my living that I could face doing and love doing at the same time?
And you know, you're talking our language here at Indie Business because you just said two things. Number one, fortunately I got fired, and number two, my passion is in something that's not traditional. So this is such great information to share. It's so encouraging. So you just started selling the pastries and baked goods right in your own backyard where you live.
Yeah, pretty well. I decided I'd rather be an employed baker than an unemployed writer at that point. And one thing, they moved to another. It got too much for me to bake at home. I found bakeries that were kind of vacant that needed somebody in them. I'd rent facilities. I got somebody to work with me. Then I remember reading the newspaper one day. At that point, I was pregnant with my first child and thinking ahead, how could I convert what I do and still be home with my child? Because that was very important to me, the flexibility. I didn't really foresee putting him in daycare. Read a newspaper article on food, the food section that every newspaper around North America, the world, in fact, has. And like a light bulb moment went off. I thought, I know how to write, I know how to bake, I'll put it together, and I'll segue. And that's what I did. I freelanced, and I went to bigger and bigger papers who, if anyone's listening in your audience, the bigger the paper, the more welcoming and nicer they are. I don't know what the correlation is, but they generally will say, yeah, what do you got, versus sometimes local papers are a little bit more conservative or a little more reticent to try somebody new, whereas big papers, they're very generous-hearted and they have more visionary spirit sometimes.
So, Marcy, at this time, you're a young mom, you're baking and you're writing.
I'm baking and I'm writing, and I realized also at that point I did have an English degree from university, but I felt at that point if I didn't take my profession further, I would be, an exalted home baker with a little bit of writing. And I found a hotel school, which is like pastry college, very much like the CIA in the States. I applied to pastry school and went for 3 years at pretty well 4 nights a week to get my pastry chef's diploma. And I always think it's wonderful to be entrepreneurial, but do your homework, like find the anchoring and foundation things to sort of give what you're doing a little bit more gravity, and it gives you a lot more confidence, too.
Almost like you have a platform to kind of stand everything on.
Yeah, and I think the more, I wouldn't say vague your profession, but the less traditional, the more traditional the training I would find to go with it. It gives you, as I say, a lot of confidence. And then if people say, where did you learn? It's lovely to say you're self-taught, but it gives you just an added edge to say, well, actually, I took this course or that study or I researched this. It gives you a little bit of an edge that comes through in how you sell yourself, I think.
So you're still selling to the local shops and the local restaurants, and you're also starting to write. So did you start by approaching larger newspapers, or did you start with smaller ones? How did you actually get your first writing gig, Marcy?
Very much like getting fired. I phoned the Montreal Gazette, where I live, and they did give me one freelance piece to do on chocolate chip cookies, which was great. And then they got a bit balky about, they didn't seem to like my ideas as much. There's many reasons. We don't know why. And I felt thwarted. And I thought, you know what? There's the New York Times. I've always been very feisty. And I decided if I was going to get a no, I'll start from the top and go down. Mm-hmm. And
they used that first one?
The first one was the Gazette, and then very soon after, the New York Times.
And did you get paid for the Gazette one, your first one?
Yes, I did, but then I realized actually what I wanted to do is write on Montreal bagels, which are very famous. Our bagels are kind of special. And Montreal said, nobody wants to write about them. We could eat them here. And the second light bulb was, but I bet you in New York, this would be far more novel to write about. They'd be a little bit more open to that. And you only risk, I remember the New York Times saying, who are you and where are you? And I said, I'm a baker and I'm a writer. I've got to do this story. And I think there was something about pure moxie that they had really nothing to lose. They said, fine, do a small piece.
Now, how did you find the right person to talk to? Did you just call or read the paper and make a logical conclusion about who to contact?
Yeah, now it's so easy. There's the Internet. But I used to phone the switchboards of newspapers if there wasn't a masthead. I would actually go to the airport, Montreal, wait till American airline planes would land and get the newspapers off the airplanes from the stewardesses, get the Wednesday papers and see who's the food editor, who's the living editor. And you quickly find out who has the power or the decision-making. And I learned also on the phone when you're trying to court editors, and it's the same for the entire publishing business, it is a courtship, and you begin a conversation of, again, like many of your listeners, you have a product you think will benefit them, and you want to give them that opportunity to partake of what you're offering.
So how many times have you been told, no, we're not interested in your story for our paper?
it's too many times to remember. I just shovel them away, and I give it great. Another no, I'm closer to my yes. Actually, I count them.
That's such a good attitude. I worked with someone once who said, when he was pitching whatever it was he was pitching, I can't remember what it was, but he could tell the person was going to say no, and he said as he was sitting at the lunch table looking, he was like, "Would you please hurry up and tell me no so I can go?"
Yeah, it's
missing my yes out there.
I know, but I do think that as you collect your no's, which are inevitable, they're a no away from that inevitable yes. It really is a numbers and energy game. Sometimes, though, when you get so many no's, and it happens, even at this point in my professional life, it does sometimes mean take a rest or, take a respite, re-examine what you're doing or re-change. Sometimes it's not even about you or your product. It just means it needs a bit of a rest.
Right, and the timing could be just wrong, too, for them.
Yeah, in the middle of Atkins, which is many years ago, you could not give away a book on baking. I mean, it's amazing that this book came to be, and that wasn't about me or my skills. That really was a nation very resistant who would think it would distill down to cookbooks, but it did.
So how long after this, Marcy, did baby number 2 come along?
Probably a couple years after, and it gave me, I felt at that point, I began to see what the rigors and demands of motherhood were, how I could balance it with freelancing. It means, when you take a deadline, you have to factor in there might be a strep throat and an asthma attack in between that deadline and that baby and that work. But you begin to learn a pace about that.
Mm-hmm. And then you added number 3. So you are really balancing or not, depending on the day maybe.
The divine in equation. It's a divine imbalance.
What are some of your best tips for doing that? I mean, not only are you writing cookbooks, but you're also managing BetterBaking.com, which is your magazine. You're also writing for various different publications, and you're being a mom. How does all this sort of create something workable? That's a lot, and your children, all 3 still at home, right?
Yes, they are. I think I would tell anybody if you appreciate that it really is an inherent imbalance to work and nurture yourself as a person or a woman or anybody, and to nurture little people, they're diametrically opposed. So if you accept that imbalance, that really is weird. It's really, in some ways, counter nature. That's the first thing. And so, number 2, accept the fact you may do less than somebody without kids or those kids are adult. You have to take on a little less but still keep your finger in the pie. And the third thing is the joy, even with the stress of doing it all, is still an inch more than the stress of not feeling fulfilled, seeing your career or your life sort of putter by and not nourishing yourself. And I think even children know when you're not filled up, and that distills down even into your parenting. So given the 2 stresses of not knowing what to do and not working and devoting, wondering where should I be, what else I be doing, versus the stress of too much, I'll go with the stress of too much, actually, because eventually it does get better. Kids do grow up.
And so, Marcy, how long after you started writing for these publications and continuing actually baking for restaurants, how long was it before the first book came along, and how did that happen?
I would say I was writing at that point for 5 years, and at that point a little bit longer than that. And I pitched the book when my youngest child was then in nursery school, and I began to see, okay, here's a certain block of time where all 3 little kids are out of the house. And that's when I felt I had enough room and window space I could pitch a larger project. And that's what I did at that point.
And did you use an agent, or did you just pitch directly to a publisher?
For that one, I used an agent, and the very first publisher she called on bought that book.
There's that Moxie working for you again.
I'm sorry? Yeah, I guess so.
Again, you got an agent with Moxie, so...
Well, it was one of 5 agents I was going to have. Ultimately, I agent for myself at this point. And I think many entrepreneurs would probably agree. If you have a lot of vision and verve and energy, you sometimes will open agents that are representing you. Mm-hmm. So it's a traditional route to have an agent, but it's not necessarily the best route for all authors, or even a necessary route for all authors.
Well, certainly with all the changes in the publishing industry since you got started, it certainly has changed a whole lot. But you used an agent, and then you got your first book. And so at some point, did you stop actually physically baking for local places, or did you continue to do that?
No, I stopped a little bit prior to that. As soon as I saw writing was going to carry me a little bit more, I always let go of something when the next wave begins to tilt the weight balance, when I see the next thing is going to carry me a little bit more and be the newer thing, then I let go of where I'm coming from. So I had stopped at that point. I started teaching baking as well at some points, but basically focused on the website and cookbooks and doing just a little freelance because I think that's very strategic. People still, as you mentioned, they read the Washington Post or Bon Appetit magazine. I think you could do what I call minimal efforts for maximal effect. I think that's a really good way of using your energy when you don't have a lot of extra time.
Minimal effort for maximum effect. We're going to come back and talk with you about that, Marcy. If you have a question or comment for Marcy and how she juggles motherhood and being a successful writer, magazine editor, and author, that's a lot. Do call us, 800-773-0355. This is Indie Business Radio with our guest, Marcy Goldman. We'll be right back.
Why is everyone listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com? Because it's the future of talk radio. Every day, more and more people are finding Internet radio as not just an alternative media, but as a replacement to traditional AM and FM broadcast stations. Internet radio offers a wider variety of programs, convenient on-demand listening that meets your schedule, and fewer commercial interruptions. And GlobalTalkRadio.com is already leading the way by matching this content with a highly targeted Internet audience. GlobalTalkRadio.com offers its listeners one of the widest programming varieties on the Internet, from business and finance to self-improvement, paranormal, health, literature, romance, politics, and more. There are also opportunities for prospective hosts who would like to host their own weekly or one-time talk shows. Want to learn more? Check us out at www.globaltalkradio.com and see the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. I'm your host, Donna Maria, and my guest this afternoon is professional pastry chef and master baker and syndicated columnist and author and mom and magazine editor at betterbaking.com. Her name is Marcy Goldman, and her plate is really full. So I'm excited that she took the time to join me on Indie Business Radio today. Marcy, before we took our break, you were mentioning that a lot of what you do to maintain focus and keep everything going and all the plates in the air is maximizing all of your efforts and doing as little as possible and getting the most out of it. Tell us a little bit more about how you do that and how you use the Internet to help you do that.
Okay, no, I'd be glad to. I think part of it is you do your research first. You find out if you, let's say, are writing for the most strategic hit, you've researched the journals or the books or the magazines, what is the widest circulation? And you start generally from the top down because you want to be very high profile. And it's just as easy to get a yes from the top as a yes from the bottom. And you pick things where you'd like to write. The second thing is you want to deal with people that are easy to deal with, that respond back to you. That's less touchy-feely than it sounds. It's also very expedient. If you have little time, you want people on the same page as you are, just as far as returning calls or emails, because that's less wasted effort, and that's also very strategic. And then you also, given, as you mentioned, the Internet, balance things out. There's many different mediums, so you want to do a little bit in print and a little bit online. To that end, there's less payment sometimes online. It's a relatively newer medium, and content doesn't always pay. But you also balance that too. It might be to contribute to basenotes.net or now Smell This Blog Harbor, I think it's called. They may not pay, but those are wonderful, wonderful online publications. So you figure the value of that is you will get recognition. You are building up a brand and a byline, and that may not be, exact black and white revenue, but it is very, very worthwhile. So you start making an equation of the mediums you're trying to be in, the circulation figures or the higher profile places that you want to be, and also working with people who are professional, respect, what you're doing and get back to you. Otherwise, you're sort of blowing everything out to the wind. You may not get responses, and you don't want to scatter your energies, as one person, which most writers are. I think writers and authors also, like your entrepreneurs, have to think of themselves first also as entrepreneurs and business people. It's wonderful to think of yourself as an artiste or an auteur, but you are a business, and it's a logistical spreadsheet on how you do all these things. So you're spreading your product strategically, and your time you're being extremely miserly with to get the most out of it all.
Well, and your comment about putting a little bit in print and a little bit online brings me to ask you about how BetterBaking.com was born. Tell us about that. This, by the way, it's a fantastically done resource with recipes, Marcy's fabulous recipes, and these great pictures, which I'm going to ask you about too. How did you get started doing that?
Very much like this. My first book was coming out. A local radio station asked if I do 15 minutes radio, and I was very shy in those days. I couldn't think of anything I dreaded more than when you pull a writer out of the house and make them actually speak in front of people. But the broadcast, this was in 1997, and the broadcaster said, there's something called the Internet. Have you heard of it? Yawn, because I wasn't too interested. And like many women, I thought, oh, technical computers. And he said, I could build you a little website to promote your first cookbook. And we started that way. He was very nice. I had to find a budget to pay this gentleman, so I started getting companies that I'd worked with. They're ingredient companies such as Weber Barbecue or Nielsen Massey Vanilla. They paid for advertising on my site. That was a short year of advertising at BetterBaking.com. But it helped give me a push, and it just grew from there. It went from a little 2-page thing saying, buy my cookbook, to, here's an article, here's a seasonal thing. And without really intending to it became an online platform and sort of an electronic calling card for everything else I did. Because I'm the editor and the sole contributor, I could talk about other things. When you talk about other things, when you spread out a little bit, it brings other elements, other readers, and more traffic. And over time, it just grew from that, from that point on. I don't think anyone had any idea the medium would become what it was. And the legitimacy of the medium has also changed over the years. And when you used to tell print editors I have a website, it was the same response of, yawn, so what? And now it's like, oh, how many hits and how long have you been on? And that's kind of cool. And it became, if you stay long enough at anything, over time, quantity does become a quality. And that becomes something that you can sell or you can take to the bank.
Well, I certainly personally am a testimony to that electronic calling card because, again, I discovered you when you emailed me to ask about buying essential oils. And then, of course, in your signature line, there was Better Baking. And I'm not, I have kids, I have a family, I have holidays, I do some baking, but, it's not something I want to let everybody taste because it's, especially looking at your cookbook. But the fact is, of course, everybody bakes something, and so I clicked on it, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then, lo and behold, there you were in the Washington Post, and having found out that you were the same person just really connected us in a way that may not have ever happened if it was just baking that might have brought us together.
Yeah, although some people still don't connect all the dots. They'll read me online, buy the cookbook, and they still won't put it together. It's very strange. They'll realize I wrote Jewish Holiday Baking, but they don't realize that Better Baking is also my website. It's funny, different mediums and different personas. People don't necessarily connect everything. Also, remember, baking is quite traditional, so a lot of my traffic are still rather conservative people or very crafty people. Although, it's certainly changing over the last 5 years quite a bit.
Well, what you said about people not making the connection it certainly bolsters your point to be a little bit here and a little bit there because you've got to be able to reach people who are more comfortable with different places.
That's right. And you don't know, sometimes, you'll be speaking to somebody about hockey, but it turns out that they remembered their hockey memories because of Montreal or winter and beaver tails, which is a fried dough. It's amazing if you let conversations or email conversations or whatever it is flow. You create a lot of buzz and energy about whatever your endeavor. And without being too deliberate about it, just being open to that flow of energy, different stuff comes your way. Without thinking all the time, if I do this, will I gain that, or if I know that person. I think you could network with a small N and still get somewhere, with a little bit less deliberation and more faith that it's all going to come back at you, I think.
Well, let's talk about that, Marcy, because I find with people that I work with and the Indie Beauty Network members and indie business owners that is just one of the most frustrating things about sort of finding your rhythm. You have to do the same thing over and over again with little to no reward before it catches. Is Is that what you're saying, or I want to make sure I characterize it properly?
I think you have to do the doing with far less expectation, and also drop the clock of when the it, whatever the it is to you, whatever sort of arrival, success, whatever it is, drop that. And I've only recently learned this myself. And the second thing, whatever time you think it takes, again, the it, it's about quadruple whatever you think it is. It's a lot more sowing the seeds in many different fields without checking their growth all the time than you would think. For many years, like my site, it's largely done just by me. We could talk about the photography in a minute. And I used to think, why am I doing this? There's no revenue. It was like by route or by blind faith, because it took a lot to do it. And it's just recently it's beginning to turn over. At the very least, I'm sure you found this yourself. It's given me an expertise of what it's like to run a website and to deal with different levels of houseware companies or ingredients or subscribers and editorial, of layout. Like, it's given me skills I had no idea that I was gaining. But I've been online 11 years, and it's just recently I thought, now I know why I've held on to this site for so long, what the bigger picture is about, and the rewards are a little bit, different and wider than I would have thought.
Well, and I have to say that you certainly have been diligent, because every month there is a new, beautiful cover photo at betterbaking.com. Tell us about these pictures, Marcy.
Well, the covers, I always wanted a very print look to the magazine. I think the Internet is very fast and busy, and I think baking is a nice oasis. And as a writer and as a baker, I want to give that Walden Pond in the kitchen feel. So I've kept that very print look. And I used to borrow art and ask people, do you have any art? Do I have a picture? Do you have a whatever? Because I always give credit. And over time, I realized I should get a camera. And I was, again, very resistant, because I thought, this is one more skill I'm going to have to do, one more thing in the kitchen. But it turned out to be easier than I thought. It turned out I'm a better food styler or photographer than I thought. And now there's such a closer connection between the recipes I do, taking a picture of them, and the learning, the uploading them and shaping, formatting, all that, and the liveliness and the vitality that has brought to my website, plus the autonomy. I no longer have to search for people to lend me art that coincidentally will go with the recipe that I want to do that month. The freedom has been great, and really the learning curve is much smaller than I thought. And again, people will come to the site, they'll do search engines, and the photography sometimes will bring them to my site.
Well, I got to tell you, the strawberry shortcake, Swiss chocolate strawberry scone cake, excuse me, you see?
It's okay.
What kind of baker am I? I called it a strawberry shortcake. That's not what this is. It's a Swiss chocolate strawberry scone cake. And it makes me want to stop everything I'm doing right now and go bake.
Well, that was the point. If I could have scratch and sniff attached to everybody's computer, I think I really would have invented something there.
Well, one day maybe. But, what you said is such a great point, that you mentioned that you had help putting this website together. You had programming help, website design help. But what you could do using technology, you did yourself.
Yeah, pretty well. I've been on pretty well on my own since about 2000 with the site. And each step of the way, there's another part of the learning curve. And, for your listeners, they have a craft. So sometimes I think if we know what we're doing, let's say in soaps and perfumes, it's annoying to think, oh, now I have to be a web designer, or now I have to be this, or photographer. But these days, everyone's going to have to know a little bit about all of these things. Nobody even has the budget. Even if you did, to have a whole Internet department and have to tell them do this or do that, there's always going to be a little bit of something on your site or your endeavor you're going to have to do yourself. And it's not that hard. It increases, the autonomy, which I think is very, very important. And it leads to, as I said, you don't really know. I've been asked now by print publishers for my expertise to consult as Internet person. How can I help them market their print cookbooks, knowing what I know about the electronic reader and recipes online? I never, ever would have envisioned that, because, there's always been this war between electronic publishing and print, and now I'm being consulted as somebody with a foot in both camps that has made peace with both camps.
And that's,
but I never would have foreseen that.
I love that point that you just made, because what you've been able to do is use your talent and your gifts and your passion for baking, so to speak. Great title for your book. Marcy,
I'm actually writing a book, Love, Bread, and Tango. That's the book.
Bread and Tango. And, what you've been able to do, though, and I want to say this to anyone who's listening, is that you exercise this sort of massive amount of patience as you went ahead and just plodded away, pursued what you love, found sponsors when you could, and basically pieced everything together, all surrounding your passion. Your passion for baking has always been at the center of all this. And as you've done that, you have created opportunities for yourself that you didn't plan, that you couldn't foresee, but which came just as a result of your focus and your consistency.
Well, I think, but you've mentioned I'm patient. I'm really very impatient. So but because things didn't seem to go in directions that I was pushing them, I basically was sitting or dancing on the spot, and other things seemed to happen in that time over time that I couldn't have foreseen. Well, so sometimes we don't know, but I think your intention has to be there. I think your intention to do something has to be there. Yeah. And the how of it, I think, unfolds in a different way. I think it's different than the script that we often do for ourselves, personally or professionally.
Well, and that's such a good point, too, because you didn't have all of this in mind. As you just mentioned, you tapped as a consultant. You didn't plan that. You didn't think of that. It wasn't anything that was even on your radar screen, but yet it happened because of the platform that you've built for yourself.
Yeah, it's basically having a little bit of faith in the wilderness and just staying there. I mean, I'm also a single parent of 3 sons, so I think that helps quite a bit. Perspective-wise, your time is less. As a business, you're even more pressed, and it's very imperative that you do earn or you do create something. And I think that brings a real edge or professionalism to what you do, as opposed to thinking if it doesn't work, there's a safety net. I think it really sharpens what you do quite a bit. You have to value your time and your skills in a different way, I think.
That's such an interesting perspective. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the perspective of a single mom and how that actually puts you in a different mindset for being successful than, as you mentioned, someone who might consider describing themselves as someone who had a quote-unquote safety net. We're going to come back and talk with Marcy about that and more following the publication of her most recent book, A Passion for Baking. More information at betterbaking.com. This is Donna Maria, Indie Business Radio. We'll be right back.
Want to stay on top of what's new in the radio industry? Sign up for a free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio, available exclusively to listeners of globaltalkradio.com, and find out what's new in the world of online radio. Listeners can find out about new shows and special guests. People with something special to offer can find out how to become a guest and how to prepare for an interview. And prospective hosts will find a valuable resource for everything from planning their new program to selecting topics and guests, recouping expenses by selling advertising, and more. Sign up today for your free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio by visiting www.globaltalkradio.com and learn about the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. I'm talking this afternoon with Marcy Goldman, author of A Passion for Baking, and she's sharing a lot of really good, hard-hitting information for us indie business owners, how to make everything work, how to juggle all the plates in the air, and how she's been so successful at doing that. If you have a question for Marcy, even if you have a baking question, I guess, even though that's not what we're talking about, but this is an expert, so this is your chance to ask it. 800-773-0355. Marcy, before we took our last break, you were talking a little bit about the mindset that indie business owners have to have in terms of whether there's a safety net, whatever that may be, or a financial backdrop for you if your business doesn't work. Marcy, do you think in your experience, or maybe just even working or learning or knowing other small business owners, do you find that people who feel as though they have to have a safety net, whether it's valid or not, if they feel they have something called a safety net, that they work differently from people who feel that they don't?
A little. I think it's more that when you know you don't, you really take yourself very seriously. It's not an idle hobby. If it doesn't work, there really is very evident, there's a flip side to it. It's very, very real if it doesn't work. And by the way, when I say doesn't work, I don't think anybody ever failed. They just stopped trying, which is very different. If you just keep plodding, it's inevitable. If you're on the path that you love, that you'll get there. But I think when you add up the numbers, if you don't think of yourself as an entrepreneur in a romantic way, just on a logistical spreadsheet of what you have to earn and what you have to do and how to do that, you take yourself quite seriously. It's not a lark, it's a business, and you bring those skills to your endeavor in a very different way. And as far as safety nets, as we were saying before, it's also the illusion you can have. I mean, there used to be a definition, writers are agoraphobics with working spouses. That was usually the definition of a writer. But the truth is, your spouse, your companion can lose their job or that other salary at any time, so it is kind of an illusion.
So I think it's a mindset, is what you're saying.
It's definitely a mindset. And I think also people will say, married or not, or with support or not, they'll say, I'd like to do this, or I would do this, and they'll give you a whole bunch of reasons why they can't. And I often think of J.K. Rowling's as a single mother writing by herself in a cafe. She had a day job as a teacher, and she wrote on the side. Those are a lot of words that woman penned, going, again, on empty, without an agent, without yet a publisher. So I think of that and millions like her who have made it. So you really have to want it, is the first thing. But in response to the excuses people say, who would hire me or who would buy this or what if? What if is like, to me, those are worse than swear words, those two words, what if. I would say your point being, and they'll say my point being it's difficult. And then I'll say, and your point being what? And it's difficult. It really isn't a good enough answer. If that's your only protest, you got to get by that hoop and go beyond. It's difficult, and now move on.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to work with a business coach who I called her one day for one of our coaching sessions, which cost far too much money for me to just whine for the whole hour. But I did anyway, just whined about, it was so hard, and I've got this infant and colicky and my husband and all the stuff and everything. And she let me whine and took my money and let me whine. And she said, at the end of my whining tirade, she said, okay, now, you've given me all the reasons why you can't do what you told me in our first couple of sessions you wanted to do. Now give me one reason why you can. And I remember thinking, it's a mindset. You can spend all your time thinking about how hard everything is, or you can either just work around it, work over it, push it out of the way, and just get on with it.
Yeah, see it as a challenge or creativity. And when you get tired, take a break. It's okay for any entrepreneur, even an entrepreneur without visible revenue coming in. You could still play hooky one day and go to the movies or grab a cup of coffee and retrench and recharge, and tomorrow's another day.
Mm-hmm. And you've obviously done that. So what are some of the things that have really kept you going when you contacted the potential sponsors and they said no, or maybe one month you just didn't have enough to have the kind of revenue that you had the month or the quarter before? How do you keep going when you get to those places, Marcy, that you must have had at some points in your career?
Oh, I've had them often and throughout, and you always make the mistake of thinking you're at a different level and you're beyond them. I should mention at this point I do charge for some recipes at the site. It doesn't make a huge revenue because recipes are largely free online, but applying a value to my recipes and locking up the copyright. In other words, people can't just grab all the recipes and repost them elsewhere or compete with my own print cookbooks. But applying a value, it was my way of saying these recipes have a value, quality, content, cost. And I think that really sort of helped, change the level of what I was doing. But as far as those, what I call when I come up against the wall, magically things happen. I don't know how they do, but they do. But I meditate a whole lot. I do other things. I take myself out to tango. I read a lot. I will be haunting the self-help sections of bookstores every once in a while, trying to find whatever kernel of wisdom or encouragement you can from somebody else who's walked that path, even if it means letting go for an afternoon and catching your breath. And somehow what's meant to be, as long as your intentions are positive, you'll get to that higher ground. It does pass. And those are the things that weather you, and that's your storehouse of confidence. The next time you get to that rough patch, you remember, I was there a couple of months ago or a few years ago. And then you have something to take from to give yourself solace in the present moment. And you get a little bit much more stoic. It takes a lot more huffing and puffing to make me lose my calm now than it would have even, let's say, 3 years ago.
Right, and you do, as you said earlier, you do have to do it for a while in order to get the feeling that you're describing. So paying your dues and doing your research, pays off in so many different ways.
And that staying power over time. I think staying power becomes over time the courage and the persistence. I think I'd rather have tenacity than sheer talent, given my druthers of what works, I think, in being self-employed is tenacity. Because around the next corner sometimes is that, like when you see those old Western movies, they're looking for water in the desert. Just when they thought it was not there, they suddenly will discover it. It's usually there when you let go, and you always have to, seed your fields, but leave space for things to happen. Leave that time for people to call you back or for things to sprout up. You can't sort of stare at your garden and wait for harvest every minute.
A watch pot never boils, does it?
Yes, very, very true. Although in baking, a watch pot is actually a good idea.
The one time.
Scorching, yes.
So, Marcy, you've had BetterBaking.com since 1997, so it's been 11 years, and you publish it monthly. Is that correct?
That's right. And because I learned very early on, despite the fact that the net is like, new things every 2 minutes, I couldn't keep up that. Found also a little bit of scarcity, which means to say you publish once and formally like a magazine, built up anticipation. It corralled and collected my thoughts editorially, and there's, a certain amount of sanity to once a month, and I don't let my readers push at me. I lead my ship that way. You have to also remember you run your own business. You're not dictated to. I think your clients, and your consumers sort of help you navigate a little bit. You take that input. But like a good mother, you don't let your children tell you how to parent. So I think you have to take that authority of your business a little bit.
Such good advice. Don't let anyone. Someone told me once, don't let anyone should on you. SHOUD.
It's true.
SHOULD. I thought that was pretty funny. Don't let anyone should.
Yeah. Well, in those times when I overlook my own instinct, I always rue the day. I always think, why did I do that?
Yeah. So, Marcy, as a freelance writer and an author, do you think that having an online magazine is a nice complement to what you're doing specifically? And is this something that you, in general terms, would recommend that other freelance writers and authors or authors consider doing?
Yes, I do. I think everybody needs a really small, however minimalist, electronic place online, whether it's a blog or a one-page website, but electronically it's your business card, so at the least somewhere where people can find you. I do feel differently sometimes about blogs, like I have a few of them, but there's only so much writer juice you have, and if you're filling up a website in 3 or 4 blogs, you're going to run out at what I call it the source. But I do recommend everyone have something, and if you go to Google, there's many free blogs, free website templates that you could set up. The hosting is free, so it is something. But again, spread your efforts. You don't have to know a lot, but you do have to know a little bit, and people could find you, and you can grow as you grow in your other areas of your business. But I do think, when I do other periphery things that are part of the revenue channel, but there's always a nice feeling to knowing that whether I get the outside gig or not, Better Baking is my home, my endeavor, my magazine. I'm always hireable at my own place, and it gives you that place to roost that has your name over it, which I think gives, again, that confidence. It doesn't matter what Random House says or ABC.com. BetterBaking.com is an entity. It is me, and that's my gravity, I think.
And so you mentioned you have these different streams. You have syndicated writing, you have authorship, and you have BetterBaking.com. What other sorts of revenue streams are in the mix there that we haven't talked about?
Well, I probably will be going to the next level, which is self-publishing my own books and using I have such platform. And sometimes, a traditional publisher will like one idea for a book of mine, but not the other. As you mentioned, people know me as a baker, a little bit as a writer. They don't realize I have some background in scent. So do a book on scent, perhaps, or the novel. I mean, people know me as a baker. As one publisher said, even Martha Stewart, we don't know if we want her writing a novel. Which is understandable for them to know you through one type of your work. So for that type of thing, I probably would launch my own press and start self-publishing. I know enough now to do, either a small print book or electronic books, but use the platform of the website. I have about 1 million visitors a month. I have 20,000 regular subscribers. So I do have a captive audience and they tell me very quickly, all the time, could you do this type of book or that type of book? And you get a definite message. We love your recipes. Don't mind printing out a recipe here or there, would prefer a book. So I think self-publishing in books is probably going to be the next step.
Why do you think they prefer a book?
Yeah, they really do. I think inevitably I could see now there's e-readers or electronic books where you could load up your entire cookbook and novels onto this little e-reader, which is like an iPod but bigger for text. And many companies, Sony has one, Amazon has the Kindle, which is their own product. I think inevitably, I mean, we're not all 30 and 40 and 50 and 60-something. Younger people, they download things all the time. They're electronically very comfortable. So somebody at 45 might indeed want the joy of cooking in their hand, but somebody at 22 in a college dorm very much may want the joy of cooking on their electronic reader and go into the kitchen. Mm-hmm. So I think the content that people want may be the same, especially in food, but the delivery systems are changing. But that all said, in the end of the day, most people that bake or cook, they'll take a few electronic recipes, then they sort of want the book after that. They want something to be held in hand. What I envision is people have print books that you read, on your night table and you enjoy, and you might have the electronic version on a wipeable slate in your kitchen to cook from.
Mm-hmm. So again, such a great way to summarize the importance of having your message available in different formats because people are in different places.
Yeah, and a little bit goes a long way. I think people, what you said, don't let someone should on you. They'll start saying, I should have a blog, I should have a website, I should be out here, I should be on the Food Network. There's many, 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 many stratas and ways of skinning the same cat. And I think you have to remember what you want to do is make a living and enjoy your days. I mean, has always been really my goal. I want to make a living doing what I love and enjoy my days. Between making a living and being famous, I think, is where people get stuck, especially women, and especially, I think, since feminism. It's no longer enough just to be and do well. I think people are always thinking nothing or being exceptional. In between being nothing and being exceptional, there's a whole vista of wonderful places to inhabit.
Right, and finding your place in there. I think in the in-between section is where so many people get stuck.
I think so. I think the in-between place sometimes is where the richest nooks and crannies are. And you'll know right away when you're doing what you like and there's revenue, you'll feel a sense of resonance. I think we all know when we're in that right place of resonance. It's like the sweet spot on a tennis racket. You just know. And sometimes you have to paw around a lot. But when you stop hearing those outside voices and the shoulds that you just mentioned, that's when it becomes absolutely clear where you should be going. And it's like you're getting your directives from like this divine universal source. It really is like that. Even if you're not, spiritual, you just somehow know. But you have to be quiet and still sometimes to hear that, I think. And right now it's a very busy world with many messages coming at you.
Marcy, tell me what your sons think of all this success that you've had in the baking world. First of all, are they bakers or do they just enjoy your baking?
That's a very, actually two of them, especially one of them is a really good cook and quite a pizza expert. I think they're quite energizing present. I think they've begun to see from a home base you can bring the world to your door. You can import the world and its energy into the home, which is very exciting. You could create structure, you can create revenue, even stability. If you just harness your creativity, it's all incredibly possible. So I think that's very exciting for them. It gives them options of what you can do. And I think seeing a working parent that's kind of energized and happy, I think it's what we tell our kids, I don't think they listen to. I think how we walk and carry ourselves is what they see, and I hope what my sons are seeing, that anything is possible. And I think especially creativity, which I think people think of as artistic, when you harness creativity alongside business skills, I think it's absolutely electric. So I think that's part of what they've been noticing.
And has it helped you or helped them, do you see, as they're growing young men, because you have 3 boys? Have you found that it's been great as an entrepreneur to show them not only that they can bring the world to their door, but financially they can bring the finance to their door?
Yeah, I think, one of them is he's graduating as a jazz musician from the university here, and he's going on in jazz and performance. And he recently launched his own website. He's begun reviewing jazz CDs and doing other parts of the jazz and music business. And I watch him developing this website and asking me, how do you pitch an editor and how do you do that? And skills that I took for granted that I have now have a different value as I'm showing my sons, this is how you present yourself, and this is where you get business cards, and this is where you register domains. All of that backbone to the creative endeavor, I think seeing them take that and very quietly do it in their way, but taking those skills, I think, is extremely satisfying.
What an inspiration for them, I'm sure, being able to...
I'm home making cookies.
What?
Plus, I'm home making cookies all the time. It's the perfect mother.
Well, hey, I've got 2 kids. I know what you mean, and it is great. Let's talk about that for a second, because this is a really important a topic, particularly today when there's no shortage of statistics showing how challenging it is to be a mom in a society where you're also expected to, or you want to, contribute financially. It's. What do you think about that? I mean, how have you, found the kind of lifestyle that you have chosen in compared to the one that you may have if you had a traditional job?
Well, as I said, I didn't have a choice because I was often fired from traditional jobs, although I did.
You could have looked for another traditional job. You could have gotten another 9-to-5 job.
But I saw right away the handwriting on the wall. Once I learned not to take it personally, I realized whatever's going on here, clearly I'm meant to be doing something on my own, and I'm not taking the hint too nicely. I mean, to be fired and to resist that and keep reapplying, I sort of felt I was throwing myself against some system that was trying to tell me you're meant for other or better or more appropriate things. So you're right, but I think it would have been, just a series of unsatisfying things. But, I grew up as somewhat of a latchkey kid, and I think the world has changed, but I don't think children's needs have morphed very much. I think we've all changed. Adult needs have changed. I think if you have to measure your own values of what's really, really important, and then you can craft whatever life you like. Once you leave that beaten path, I think you can. Mm-hmm. And I think it's different for every woman, every couple is going to have to approach this quite differently. I mean, I remember when my kids were little being in the park and a woman being home from work for a day, and she said, I'm a lawyer. You can't expect me as a lawyer to use my skills and stay home with little people and do Duplo or whatever, Lego things.
Right.
And I remember thinking, how is a lawyer better than a baker?
Exactly, and I could ask that question, too, being a lawyer myself and looking at your cookbook saying, I think I'd rather be a baker.
Actually, for that, I had to go to legal sites for contract negotiations and things like that. That's a wonderful extra skill. I mean, it's so much out there.
Well, Marcy, I have certainly enjoyed having you, and I know that you have been an inspiration and a source of real hard-hitting, tangible advice for my listeners here on Indie Business Radio today. We have got to wrap it up. Marcy, I want to thank you. Visit Marcy's website, betterbaking.com. I hope you'll visit the blog, indiebusinessblog.com, where we always continue the discussion, and you can visit indiebusinessradio.com and download all my shows 24/7 wherever you are in your busy life. In the meantime, enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way.
You're listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com.